Okay, so I'm Unseen Warfare, and I'm back. It's been a minute. I haven't done one of these live readings or readings in a bit. But the topic, I was going to do letters of Saint Seraphim Rose, and I decided not to do that and just talk about discernment really today, and maybe go over some quotes and some ideas I've been having lately. Um, about the events in the world, that the crazy world we live in, and all the strange things that have been happening, mainly since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. All right, hello Denise, it's good to see you as always, and it's good to hear from you as well. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. We got, this kind of spat between all these political talking heads with Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and, the Zionist, what's his name, Ben Shapiro, and all these people. And they have all their opinions. And it just seems like there's like a flooding the airwaves with so much information for people to try to discern what's going on there. And I'm not going to act like I particularly know what's going on there, but I think that's kind of detrimental to the topic of discernment, is trying, to perceive what is the truth in a world full of lies that's always trying to manipulate you in some way, or push you to some type of understanding for some political agenda. Right now, I would say there's some strange occurrences in that situation. For instance, there's this Paul E. Vallely, and this was something, an account that often covers like Scientology kind of brought up, that this Paul E. Vallely is on this there there were some kind of contributor to Turning Point USA, and at the same time they wrote a paper on psyops. So I'm going to go to this paper on the psyops. Let's see what it's called, because I've kind of forgot it. And yeah, here it is. The paper is called From Psyop to Mind War: The Psychology of Victory, and it's written by Colonel Paul E. Vallely, or Valley. He's a commander, and it's with Major Michael A. Aquino. And I remember growing up, and this guy would go on talk shows. He would show up on like maybe Jerry Springer or Oprah or something like that. And there was some strange thing that happened at this Presidio it was this, the headquarters of the 7th Psychological Operations Group, United States Army Reserve, Presidio, San Francisco, California, 1980. Now, there was some talk that there was some weird stuff going on here dealing with kids and the military. And some kids said that they remembered this guy's eyebrows because he has very strange eyebrows. Well, anyways, they wrote some paper on psyop to mind war, and I skimmed through the paper, and essentially what it's talking about is that there needs to be some change in the way psychological operations are done. I guess we could read the paper. Why not? It's only 10 pages, so let's go through this paper. So, from psyop to mind war: The Psychology of Victory. All right. It says, Introduction by Michael A. Aquino, Colonel Military, Lieutenant Colonel Military Intelligence, USAR, RET, November 2003. It says, in the later 1970s, psychological operations, PSYOP doctrine in the U.S. Army had yet to emerge from the disappointment and frustration of the Vietnam War. Thus, it was that in 1980, Colonel Paul Vallely, okay, so the guy that's some contributor to Turning Point USA, commander of the 7th PSYOP group, asked me in his headquarters and PSYOP research analysis FAE team leader to draft a paper that would encourage some future thought within the PSYOP community. He did not want a Vietnam post-mortem, but rather some fresh and innovative ideas concerning PSYOP evolution and application. I prepared an initial draft, which Colonel Vallely reviewed and annotated, which resulted in a revised drafts and critiques until he was satisfied, and the result was that of this paper, From PSYOP to Mind War, The Psychology of Victory. Colonel Vallely sent copies of it to various government offices, agencies, commands, and publications involved in an interest in PSYOP. He intended it as not an article for publication, but simply as a, quote, talking paper to stimulate dialogue. In this it was quite successful, judging by the extensive and lively letters he received concerning it over the next several months. That should have been the end of Mind War, a minor, quote, staff study which had done its modest job. With the arising of the internet in the 1980s, however, Mind War received an entirely unexpected and somewhat comic resurrection. Allusions to it gradually proliferated, with its sinister title quickly winning in the most lurid conspiracy theory reputation. The rumor mill soon had transformed it into an Orwellian blueprint for Manchurian candidate, mind control, and world domination. My own image as an occult personality added fuel to the wildfire. Mind Ward was now touted with a lunatic fringe as conclusive proof that the Pentagon was awash in black magic and devil worship. Now that this absurdly comic opera had at least somewhat subsided, I thought it might be interesting to make a complete and accurate copy of the paper available, together with an introduction and some historical hindsight annotations to place it in a reasonable context. After all, it did, and perhaps still does, have something worthwhile to say. Within the U.S. military, PSYOP has habitually been relegated to a back seat as a, quote, force multiplier. The principal strategic decisions are made in consideration of traditional political and military interests and goals. Only then is PSYOP invited to the table to help achieve already agreed upon missions more efficiently. Mind War reverses this sequence. Psychological means for achieving victory, essentially through convincing the enemy that he really wants to bring his national policies into harmony with ours, are fashioned in support of basic political goals. The use of, quote, ordinary military force, bombs, bullets, etc., is regarded as the, quote, last resort in the circumstances wherein mind war by itself fails. Okay, so he has some, something here at the bottom of the paper. It says later Major General USAR. The term mind war was coined by another PSYOP officer, Colonel Richard Sutter, and myself in 1977. After seeing the recent film Star Wars, we played with a modification of its name as a futuristic replacement for the somewhat bland Army designation psychological operations, and an avidly science fictional sentiment or treatment of mind war, complete with a caricature of Sutter at its helm, appears in my Star Wars story, The Dark Side, available at www.exper.org /M Aquino. I think that's what it says. It's a real small print there, so it's hard to read. Hello, Calix. How you doing, brother? Hope you're well. Anybody that stopped by right now, I appreciate you guys. It's awesome. It's cool. Okay, so we're going to continue the paper. It says the advantage of mind war is that it conducts war in non-lethal, non-injurious, and non-destructive ways. Non-destructive ways, he said. That's kind of a joke. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to manipulate the minds of men, but that's non-lethal. This is the kind of materialistic outlook. It's like, what kind of spiritual damage are you doing to people through these psychological operations? They don't think about that. But I'm sure he does, considering he's a black magician or something. You know what I mean? Worker of the dark arts. Essentially, you overwhelm your enemy with argument. You seize control of all the means by which his government and populace process information to make up their minds, and you adjust it so that those minds are made up as you desire. Everyone is happy, and no one gets hurt or killed, and nothing is destroyed. Okay. Ordinary warfare, on the other hand, is characterized by its lack of reason. The antagonists just maim or kill each other's people and steal and destroy each other's land until one side is hurt so badly that it gives up, or both sides are hurt so badly that they agree to stop short of victory. After such a war, there is lasting misery, hate, and suffering. The only loser in mine war are the war profiteers, companies, and corporations which grow fat on orders for helicopters, tanks, guns, munitions, etc. Consequently, what President Dwight Eisenhower referred to as, quote, the military industrial complex can be countered upon to resist implementation of mine war as the governing strategic conflict doctrine. That's the mine war prospectus in its most simplified form. While in the 1980s, I had no reason to think that this paper had any official effect upon U.S. PSYOP doctrine within or beyond the Army. It was with some fascination that I saw specifics of its prescriptions applied during the first Gulf War, and recently even more obvious than during the 2003 invasion of Iraq. In both instances, extreme PSYOP was directed both against the object of the attack and upon U.S. domestic public perception and opinion. And in 2003, to the extent of embedding journalists with military units to inevitably channel their perceptions and perspectives. Wow. I mean, he's just telling it, isn't he? Uh, the impact of even these minor techniques of mind war was remarkable. A psychological climate of inexorable U.S. victory was created and sustained in both the United States and Iraq, which accelerated that victory on the ground. Somewhat less positively, the failure of mind war in the instance to be guided by only the most righteous principles of truth and ethics has just inexorable led to substantial post-war evaporation of the euphoric climate. Therein lies the Achilles heel of the mind war, invoking it as it does the most intense emotions and commitments of its audiences. It must deliver the goods as they are the judge by the target audiences. If the ethic values of those audiences are not respected, if mind war is used only in the service of an ulterior motives and objectives, the resulting disintoxication can be socially shattering. In 1987, I wrote a more extensive research paper for the National Defense University concerning the ethics of PSYOP, particularly if mind war is actually to be employed as a feature of U.S. foreign policy. I cannot stress too strong the need for its subordination to the strictest and most enlightened principles of humanity as discussed in that paper. Psychological operations, the ethnic dimension. It also is available for download, he says, at his website. I might go and find that paper, I don't know. Now let's make a look at the 1980 Mind War paper itself in addition to its original footnotes, which generally identified, quote, source. I have added a few new ones to highlight, critique some of its themes. These new footnotes are identified by MA 2003 at their beginning. As far as I'm concerned, or I know, this is the latest installment, like the final, draft of the paper um, that I have here. So, all right. So this is Lieutenant Colonel John Alexander's military review article in support of psychotronics, intelligence, and operational employment of ESP was decidedly provocative. Criticism of research in this area based on its existing frontiers of scientific law brings to the mind the laughter that greeted the Italian scientist Spallanzani in 1794 when he suggested that bats navigate in the dark means of what we now call sonar. Quote, if they see with their ears, then do they hear with their ears? Went the joke, but I suspect the U.S. Navy is glad someone took the idea seriously enough to pursue it. Okay, so they're basically talking about, psychotronics. Like, these are some, alchemical ideas that they bring to fruition and use as military weapons, really. Psychotronic research in its infancy, but the U.S. Army already possesses an operational weapons system designed to do what LTC Alexander, or Lieutenant Colonel Alexander, would like ESP to do. Except that this weapon system uses existing communication media. It seeks to map the minds of neutral and enemy individuals and then to change them in accordance with U.S. national interest. It does this on a wide scale, embracing military units, regions, nations, and blocks. In its present form, it is called psychological operations. Does PSYOP work, or is it merely a cosmetic with its field commanders who would rather not be bothered? Had the question been asked in 1970, the answer would have been that the PSYOP works very well indeed. In 1967 and 1968 alone, a total of 29,276 armed Viet Cong NAV, the equivalent of 95 enemy infantry battalions, surrendered to ARVN and MACV forces under the Chai Hoi amnesty program. The major PSYOP effort in Vietnam at the time, MACV, I guess I could call it, estimated that the elimination of that same number of troops in combat would cost up to 6,000 dead. On the other hand, we lost the war, not because we were outfought, but because we were out psyoped. Our national will to victory was attacked more effectively than we attacked that of the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong, and the perception of this fact encouraged the enemy to hang until the United States finally broke and ran for home. So our PSYOP failed. It failed not because its principles were unsound, but rather because it was outmatched by the PSYOP of the enemy. The Army's efforts enjoyed some impressive successes, but our own PSYOP did not really change the minds of the enemy populace, nor did it defend the U.S. populace at home against the propaganda of the enemy. Furthermore, the enemy's PSYOP was so strong that not bigger armies or better weapons, overcame all the Cobras and Spookies and ACAVs and B-52s, we better weapons. Overcame all the, wait, B-52s, we filled it. The lesson is not to ignore our own PSYOP capability, but rather to change it and strengthen it so that it can be precisely that kind of thing to our enemy in the next war. Better hardware is nice, but it by itself will change nothing if we do not win the war for the mind. Wow, man, crazy. The first thing it is necessary to overcome is a view of the PSYOP that limits its route, predictable, over obvious, and hence marginally effective. Quote, leaflet and loudspeaker applications, battlefield devices of this sort have their place, but it should be that of an accessory to the main effort. The main effort cannot begin as the company or division level. It is, okay, whatever. All right, so the footnote says, Alexander Lieutenant Colonel John B., the new mental battlefield, beam me up, Spock, in military review. Wow, that's weird. Alexander, Colonel, was involved in the psychological ideas experiment with an ESP and remote viewing. These have no connections with either traditional PSYOP or mind war. my paper, Project Stargate, 200 million up in smoke and mirrors. Okay. So, I'm sure people know about remote viewing, right? It's very strange stuff. Which that seems like, it's like a demonic sort of delusion in a way. Like the demons could probably allow you to see from far distances, and I think that's probably what that is. Some sort of black magic going on there. Um, more complex. Yeah. Okay, so we're going back to this paper. So I'm going to read the bottom part so I can continue on to the next page. I'm at 4 pages. There's 10 pages in this document, just for the record. So the first thing is necessary to overcome is a view of the psyop that limits its route predictable, over obvious, and hence marginally effective. Quote, leaflet and loudspeaker applications, battlefield devices, or this sort have their place, but it should be that of an accessory to the main effort. That main effort cannot begin at the company or division level. It must originate at the national level. It must strengthen our national will to victory, and it must attack and ultimately destroy that of our enemy. It both in both cases, and it is affected by physical combat, but it is the type of war which is fought on a more subtle basis as well in the minds of the national populations involved. So let us begin with a simple name change. We shall rid ourselves to the self-conscious, almost, quote, embarrassed concept of, quote, psychological operations. In its place, we shall create mind war. The term is harsh and fear inspiring, and so it should be. It is a term of attack and victory, not one of rationalization, coaxing, and conciliation. The enemy may be offended by it. That is quite all right, as long as he is defeated by it. A definition is offered. Mind war is the deliberate, aggressive convincing of all participants in a war that we will win. Or wait, mind war is a deliberate, aggressive convincing of all participants in a war that we will win that war. Okay, so it's all right. I'll get it. It is deliberate in that it is planned, systematic, and comprehensive effort involving all levels of activity, from the strategic to the tactical. It is aggressive because opinions and attitudes must be actively changed from those antagonistic to us to those supportive of us if we are to achieve victory. We will not win if we content ourselves with countering options and attitudes instilled by enemy governments. We must reach the people before they resolve to support their armies, and we must reach those armies before our combat troops ever see them on the battlefields. Compare this definition with that of the psychological warfare as first offered by General William Donovan of the OSS in his first World War II era, quote, basic estimate of psychological warfare. He states, quote, psychological warfare is the coordination and use of all means, including moral and physical, in which the end is attained, other than that of the recognized military operations, but included the psychological exploitation of the result of those reorganized military actions which tend to destroy the will of the enemy to achieve victory and to damage his political or economic capacity to do so, which tends to deprive the enemy of the support, assistance, or sympathy of his allies or associates or neutrals, or to prevent his acquisition of such support, assistance, or sympathy, or which tend to create, maintain, or increase the will of victory of our own people and allies, and to acquire, maintain, or to increase the support, assistance, and sympathy of neutrals. if the euphemism, quote, psychological operations resulted from, as one general officer put it in his 1917 letter, quote, a great need for the synonym which would be used in peacetime that would not shock the sensibilities of a citizen of democracy, then it may have succeeded domestically. On the other hand, it does not seem to have reassured the sensibility of the Soviets who in 1980 described the U.S. Army PSYOP as included, quote, unpardonable methods of ideological sabotage, including not just blackmail, provocation, and terror. Okay, he's got a footnote here. He says Roosevelt Kermit War Report of the OSS New York Walker Company. Okay, let's see. He's just giving a source on that. All right. Some letter. I mean, it's just sources. The reluctance with which the Army has accepted even an antiseptic PSYOP component is well documented in Colonel Alfred Paddock's brilliant treatise on the history of PSYOP establishment. Again and again, efforts to forge this weapon into its most effective configuration were frustrated by leaders who could not or should not see that wars are fought and won, lost not on battlefields but in the minds of men, as Colonel Paddock so aptly concludes. He says, quote, in a real sense, the manner in which psychological and unconventional warfare evolved from 1941 until their union as a formal army capacity in 1952 suggests a theme that runs throughout the history of special warfare. The story of a hesitant and reluctant army attempts to cope with concepts and organizations of an unconventional nature. I butchered that sentence. I lost focus. I'm going to read that again for myself. Sorry. He said, this Colonel Paddock, in a real sense, the manner in which psychological and unconventional warfare evolved from 1941 until their union as a former army capability. What? As a former army capability in 1952 suggests a theme that runs throughout the history of special warfare. The story of a hesitant and reluctant army attempted to cope with concepts and organizations of an unconventional nature. I don't know. According to the present doctrine, PSYOP is considered an accessory to the main efforts of winning battles and wars. The term usually used is, quote, force multiplier. It is certainly not considered a precondition to command decisions. Thus, PSYOP cannot predetermine the political or psychological effectiveness of a given military action. It can only be used to point that action in the best possible colors as it is taken. Mind war cannot be relegated. It is, in fact, the strategy to which tactical warfare must conform if it is to achieve maximum effectiveness. The mind war scenario must be preeminent in the mind of the commander and must be the principal factor in every field decision. Otherwise, the sacrifice measures which actually contribute to winning the war to measures of immediate tangible satisfaction. Consider the rationale for, quote, body counts in Vietnam. Accordingly, PSYOP, quote, combat support units as we are now know them must become a thing of the past. Mind war teams must offer technical expertise to the commander from the onset of the planning process, and at that level down to that of the battalion. Such teams cannot be composed as they are now of branch and material officers and NCOs who know simply the basis of tactical propaganda operations. They must be composed of full-time experts who strive to translate the strategy of national mind war into tactical goals, maximize the effective winning of the war, minimize the loss of life. Such mind war teams will win the commander's respect only if they can deliver on their promises. So this is the guy, really think about this. This guy, and the guy over him, really, this Paul Vallely, is like a major contributor that's like listed on the website for Turning Point USA. I mean, it becomes this thing where it's like the things he's describing with this mind war paper are one to one with I would say what we see in politics today, like how they're trying to win this psychological war on the people, and they're battling it out in real time. And it makes me think like every single one of these talking heads are in on it, and they're all just sort of directing people, to a particular set of values that they want you to have, then ways they want you to think. And unfortunately, in the end, they're going to get what they want because so many people have bought into it. And there's very few questioning these talking heads. Like, I would say that anybody who has any type of leeway in the current political spectrum is participating in mind war. It's just becoming more and more obvious that this is the case. And we as the people, we have to be less trusting to those that the algorithm is perpetuating and telling us these are the guys we should listen to. um Absolutely, silent weapons for quiet wars. And it's loud and clear if you're looking at what's really going on. I mean, but that's something that I think people fail to realize is like manufacturing consent is like, as long they feel justified, as long as you allow them to do what they're doing, they feel as if you should be this, that you're owed this or some way for allowing their psychological operation, for you to buy into their psychological operation. It's like, yeah, what did you think we weren't going to be working for the oligarchs and be your talking head? It's the same old thing over and over again. When I was studying the world revolutionary movement, and it's like going back to Karl Marx's whole thing, it's like he's working for the oligarchs, but he's telling it like as if, oh, it's all about the workers, right? And that's whole Lenin's whole thing. They get into the minds of men and possess them, and it's almost as if they've created little dictators, right? With this current internet personality thing. So you've got your little cult leaders, and your little cult leaders are playing little games where they're attacking each other, but each one is directing and shifting the consciousness of men to compartmentalize them in little groups. And what for? So people don't get together and sort of like say like, okay, well, we need to like do something about these politicians who are bought and paid for. And it's like they'll be the talking head and say all the right things, but it's that 1%. That's where truth, like, this is something in the paper it sort of talks about, is using truth as a weapon. It's like you believe in a person like Charlie Kirk because he's telling the truth about so many things. But what's the thing he's not telling you is that Turning Point USA is a paid contributor, is the person who works for the Seventh PSYOP group out of Fort Bragg. You know what I mean? What's going on there? Why is that the case? And I was like, I don't know the ins and outs and like who's working for who and who's paying who. All I know is this: they can't be trusted, and it's best to disconnect from this. And my solution is connect with Christ, go to church, have a strong foundation, have a strong worldview, so you're not caught into the trap of these ideological, you know, weird frameworks they want you to think in. Okay, so what it was, okay, so Marx boasted of doing away with family, religion, and state on this baseless Hegelian view of history. And absolutely. And, and the totalitarian state becomes God. So the traditional state has to go away. The traditional czar has to go, that cares for his people and he directs them towards goodness and justice. That must go. Instead, now you have your hero that's going to free you from these oppressors that have been oppressing you. But were those people really oppressed? And the answer is no. The Russians weren't oppressed by their Tsar. This was like freest, one of the freest nations or countries in the world. Um, at that time, they had freedom of speech. They had jobs. He helped people, like he allowed Muslims to have their mosques. He allowed the Jews to have farmland. Like there was all these things that the Masons who owned the newspapers at that time were attacking the Tsar as if he was this evil leader. But they would do things like, create an event, a psychological operation, to call him Bloody Nicholas, right? They would do things. If you look into the history of it, they were constantly trying to convince the people that their czar was this evil thing. But it's like, that's Edward Bernays. It's like, oh, your old toothpaste is no good. Buy this new toothpaste, and that's how they sell it to you. While the new toothpaste is, has all chemicals in it that you never want to use or something. That's usually how it's framed. And what it becomes, I've noticed at least, is like if somebody is truly good in the world, they get slandered and attacked, and then once the people replace them because their passions get inflamed by the propagandist, then the propagandists set up their person, and their person's 100 times worse. Like take Stalin for instance. There's a quote about him plucking a chicken, every feather out of the chicken, and left one feather there. And, he threw and the chicken's starving, by the way, and he throws it a little crumb of feed, chicken feed. And he says, "You want to know how I govern our people? That's how I govern our people." And the chicken's running against Stalin's boot, scared, afraid, all his feathers plucked. It's like that's what the dictator does. He gets the people so dependent on him by crushing their spirits. And that's what we're seeing kind of right now, is like the crushing of the spirits of men to where they feel as if they can't fight back, to where you're just a plucked chicken sitting on their boot or something. It's a terrible, terrible way that these satanic people think. Um, and then you got a guy like, let's take Fuentes recently. He's like, you know, I like winners. Of course, this whole time he's been trying to convince people that he was a supporter of Hitler in some way, which I'm not. Anybody who knows me, I don't like Hitler whatsoever. I think he was just as much a part of the plan, and he was used by the Zionists, and they were working together with the Zionists. And that's a documented fact. I think that in a case with someone like Stalin, it's like you got Nick Fuentes saying he supports Stalin because he won, and it's like, what did he win? Being an evil satanic dictator, and the same person is supposed to be a Catholic. That's what I mean, though. Is like, no matter the talking head, if they're not directing you to Christ, they're directing you towards Antichrist in this world. That's unfortunately the reality we live in. And, you know, that's where discernment comes in. And how do we discern a situation when, the information is just, we're flooded with so much of it, we don't know where to turn. And I think the answer always is turn towards God, and then He'll give you the grace to sort of, you know, figure out the situation. I dropped the link in the chat. I didn't do that for whatever reason. I don't know why that popped up. That's weird. Okay. All right. So there's a link if anybody wants to come up. But I'm gonna go do something else for now. We get the gist of the paper. It is what it is. I could go back to that, but I really don't feel like reading that weird Satanist. Um, yeah, like there's a quote from Father Seraphim Rose I read. As for an offering to the modern monasticism, page 52, quote, moral and hidden obedience is performed in the soul. It seems to refer generally to our obedience to God, which, as we think, is insufficient if we merely externally express obedience to monastic or church authorities. It may happen that if we place too strong an infinite emphasis on external obedience, it becomes a mechanical substitute for true voluntary internal renunciation of one's own will and understanding. The difference can be felt in the heart. Sooner or later, meaningless mechanical obedience will cause a feeling of discomfort and tension. And this is the sign that something is wrong. Sincere, eternal obedience is accompanied by the joy and relief from the fact that you did not have to rely solely on yourself. This theme is is exceptionally deep and closely related to the whole theme of the struggle of true orthodoxy against false orthodoxy in the 20th century, especially Sergianism, where obedience indeed becomes for people and the church organization a form of slavery. True obedience is connected with internal freedom, without which there is no church life. And what he's talking about is Sergianism. So Sergianism is this. Let's go to the topic of Sergianism. I've covered this in the past, but let's give a definition for Sergianism. I'm going to go to that right now. So let's see if I can find the appropriate definition for this term. So, all right. So it says Sergianism is the support of the policies of the state and government and everything, even when mass killing of people occur, they lull the eschatological vigilance of believers. Support for the theory that Russia is a great power and faith is coming in the coming prosperity of Russia. The belief that she is fighting the quote collective West. The presence of various heresies and misconceptions in the parishes of the Russian Federation that no one heals or suppresses Kiliism, veneration of Rasputin, Ivan the Terrible, name worshiping heresy, and maintaining the cult of war, holy war, waiting for the Tsar, neo fascism and nationalism, building the Russian world, aggressive attitudes toward the history of Rokor, in particular towards Metropolitan Vitaly Ustinov. 20 years ago, the Synod of Bishops of the Russian Orthodox Church, in a distinctive message to the flock, gave a truthful negative assessment of the then state of the state of the government of the Russian Federation. Now that same regime and the same rulers have remained, and their crimes against the people and the suffering country has multiplied many times, and the Synod remains silent, just thus justifying these crimes. All right, so that was from something, but that sort of describes it. It's like bowing down to leaders just because they're in the position of leadership. It's not because it's like just because they hold a title, right? And it's like that's blind obedience. We only are supposed to bow to our bishops in the sense that they're followers of Christ because we're bowing to Christ in them. In that sense, it's the same reason why when an Orthodox Christian kisses the hand of his bishop, he's not kissing his hand to emasculate himself in some way. This is because he handles the body and blood of Christ. That's the purpose of it, right? And in that same sense, that's how we're supposed to view any leader in a government or otherwise. That's like, why would I bow to someone that is actively persecuting the church, is perpetuating satanic policies into the world, and masking themselves as true followers of Christ, or directing people towards God? And then there's no way that's true. It's just not true. And unfortunately, people want to be deceived. It seems people have itching ears. It feels to me like it's become a popularity contest, and people want to be psychologically manipulated. Because when you expose it, what do? They get angry at the person exposing it. It's like, why are you angry? If you're with the truth, if you're a follower of Christ, and I'm showing you, hey, this patriarch of yours is, you know, selling cigarettes and liquor and has made billions of dollars doing it, and uses the church for that. And this church was established by Stalin, and this Sergius that they're venerating and building statues to was pointing out churches to bomb and Orthodox Christians to send to the gulag. It's like these are all things that you, as a follower of Christ, should convict you to have some zeal and anger towards those acts, not the person telling you it. But that's an indication that we're dealing with lukewarm, deluded, disturbed people that are undiscerning, and they're darkened because they've fallen under anathemas. And that's another reason, like, I decided to sort of bring up the topic of discernment, because there's so many that are undiscerning today, and they're looking for reasons and ways out because they prefer comfort to truth. And unfortunately, that's the modern world. People rather be comfortable, and they use their external eyes. Everything that's material is what convinces them of something's legitimacy. It's there's a great quote by Archbishop Averki on officialness that I'm going to go to right now, and I really think this is important. So let's see if I can find it. It's close by, so. All right, so here it is. That's what Archbishop Averki had to say. He says, Archbishop Averki perceived the overshadowing of the spiritual by the earthly in church life led to something loss of something necessary for all Christians, an awareness of the distinction between what is official and what is right. In turning his attention to the outer world, man seeks the quote accepted position, what is right and good in the eyes of others, rather than to be inwardly right with God and his own conscience. To idolize and to conform oneself to something because it is, quote, officially right or recognized, is to ask to be deceived. For Satan can easily, especially in our times, make outward, quote, officialness coexist with inward falsity. For this reason, Archbishop Averki emphasized, one must realize and remember that orthodoxy is not only and always that which is officially called, quote, orthodox. For in our false and evil times, the appearance of everywhere of pseudo-orthodoxy which raises its head and is established in the world is an extremely grievous but regrettably an already unquestionable fact. This false orthodoxy strives fiercely to substitute itself for true orthodoxy, as in his time Antichrist will strive to supplant and replace Christ with himself. Okay, so I got a topic I want to cover that's kind of related to this, and it's about Kiliism and the Christian Zionist. This is something that's kind of an undiscerning thing that I'm seeing a lot lately. And it bothers me, it's like, what is going on with this? This is crazy. Let's see if I can find this. I just was kind of discussing this recently, so maybe I can find it. All right. One moment. Okay, here it is. So I found something. It was like like a Protestant preacher on Twitter, and he's like, Israel is God's favorite nation. All right, this is what he's saying. And someone wrote this, and it's like, God and Jesus are Zionist. I thought that was crazy. And they quoted AI, and this is what AI is telling people. It says Jesus Christ's second coming involves his visible return to earth, especially to Jerusalem, to establish a literal 1,000-year millennial kingdom, reigning as King David's from King David's throne in the temple in Jerusalem, bringing global peace, righteousness, and judgment. It's crazy. All right, so this is something that they're pushing, these Christian Zionists, that Christ is going to rule from the temple in Jerusalem, and he's going to bring righteousness and world peace, all right? Watch this. This is something Father Seraphim Rose said. I'm going to link that article right now of what he said. So I'm going to put this in the comments real quick. Here's the article. All right. There's the article. And so I'm going to go to the section where he actually covers this topic about this reigning from the temple in Jerusalem, right? And what these Christian Zionists are teaching. Okay, so he says, take for example the very question of the temple in Jerusalem. It is true, according to Orthodox prophecies, that the temple will be rebuilt in Jerusalem. He says, if you look at people like Hal Lindsey or even the fundamentalist Carl McIntyre, they're also talking about the building of the temple, but they're talking about it as though we are building it in order for Christ to come back and reign over the world for 1,000 years. What they are talking about is the coming of Antichrist, but the millennium, according to the Protestant interpretation, as being a special 1,000-year reign at the end of the world, is actually the reign of Antichrist. In fact, there have already been people who have arisen and proclaimed their 1,000-year kingdom, which is going to last until the end of the world. The last one was Adolf Hitler. This is based upon the same kind of chiliastic idea, that is, interpreting the millennium in a worldly sense. The actual 1,000 years of the apocalypse is the life in the church, which is now. That is the life of grace. And anyone who lives it sees that. Compared to the people outside, it is indeed heaven on earth. But this is not the end. This is our preparation for the true kingdom of God, which has no end. There are many books of basic Orthodox knowledge now available. Those who are seriously concerned about studying the signs of the times should first be well versed in some of these books, and they should be reading them, seriously studying them, and having them as daily food. The best books to read are not someone's interpretation of Revelation, the book of the Apocalypse, because right now there's not really any Orthodox interpretation of this in English. Actually, there is, and it gives a little footnote here. It says the commentary on the Apocalypse by Archbishop Verki, Tusha, published as this talk was given. So, and that Saint Seraphim helped publish that book, so that's a reliable book. I recommend that book, and I've actually read that book on stream in the past. So, yeah, it's a great book. The best books are the basic spiritual textbooks. That's true too. First of all, these are the basic texts of the Orthodox dogmas. The various catechisms, one of the best is the 8th century work of St. John of Damascus on the Orthodox faith, which goes through the whole of the catechism and even earlier ones, as St. Cyril of Jerusalem's catechetical lectures, that is, lectures prepared for people about to be baptized, which goes through the whole creed and tells the church what the church believes. There are many similar books of catechism, both in ancient times and in more modern times. More recently, we have the Catechism in Russian of the Metropolitan Platon and Metropolitan Philaret, which are a little shorter and simpler. Then there is a different kind of book, commentaries on Holy Scriptures. There are too many of these in English. There are not too many of these in English, rather. See St. Cyril of Alexandria's commentary on the Scriptures, Logos, 6 volumes, and the explanation of the New Testament by Blessed Theophylact, Archbishop of Ohrid in Bulgaria. That's by Chrysostom Press. So that was published after this talk. But we do have some of the commentaries of St. John of Chrysostom. This area is a little bit weak in English because there are many good books in Russian that are not in English yet, including more recent books of commentaries on the scriptures, even on the Apocalypse of Archbishop Verki books are very good, but they're just being put into English now. God willing, before too long, they will be out, and that's something that has really revolutionized in recent times, is the trend, having the ability to quickly translate these things into English, which we just didn't have that. You know, even 15 years ago, it wasn't as good as it is now. Um, and so there's some people that are, you know, they have problem with machine, you know, translations in some way, but I think it's good personally, and I've done a few of them. And of course, you've got to go through and make sure things are right, and you can, you know, use a dictionary to sort of make sure you know, see what terms are in another language and what would be the best use for it in English and stuff like that. But then besides these two kinds of books, basic catechism and commentaries on the scriptures, are all the books on the Orthodox spiritual life. These include the Lausiac history. I've been listening to this audiobook. Let's see if I can um, drop that in the chat, actually, because I have that. Where did I put it, though? Yeah, I have this. I know I do. I highly recommend this history too, by the way. Like, it's awesome, really. Oh wow, where did I put it? You know what? I think I put it here. Well, you know what I'll do is when the show's over, um, I'll go back and put it in the chat in some way. I'll like pin it in the comments because it's really good, worth a listen. Unfortunately, you know, I've got a large archive of all the stuff that I keep to try to have notes on these things. I can't retain it all, you know. It's a lot of stuff, but it sometimes it just gets lost in all the things that I'm reading and looking into. And it, for some reason, certain things that don't just like pop up when you use keywords. I don't know why that is, but I gotta figure that out. I need a better system, more organized. Um, well, but yeah, you know, this Christian Zionist type thing that's going on, that's a really strange situation. And as you see, he kind of points out immediately, like these people are going to follow Antichrist. And they think they're going to follow Christ as he sits on his throne in Jerusalem or something. And, you know, that's an important thing to know how to discern. And how can we discern it? And he's explaining that now. Like, that's the point he's making. Is like, how can we, as Orthodox Christians, or even those that are not, I would hope that you know, could pull something out of this, because it is important, is that, you know, there's these spiritual heavyweights out there that really were dealing with very similar things that we deal with today, you know, propaganda and things. This has always been happening for a long time, and we have to know how to sort of deal with these mental diseases that the demons are trying to, you know, take over our minds in a lot of ways and implant things. And how do we need weapons to fight that, because we're at war. We are. And it's not only with men, you know, we're spiritual wickedness in high places, as the scriptures say. So that's going on. And, you know, I think that the reality is, and I said this the other day, is, you know, the same people that had Christ crucified today are actively reigning in the Antichrist, right? and you know, agents of the Antichrist are everywhere, and they're promoting their propaganda throughout, you know, media and social media, and every avenue they can. They're promoting Antichrist and an Antichrist agenda, and that's terrifying, especially for, you know, those for eyes to see and ears to hear. And I'm not saying that in a prideful way, but I know this, like it, like what Saint Seraphim's talking about is like you read these patristics, you know, and you see, like, just like how I just explained, like this person's talking about this chiliastic interpretation, like, you know, Christ was a Zionist, and then, you know, we look, and the belief they're talking about was anathematized very early on in the church. This Chiliasm, you know, this 1,000-year reign, right? And Christ will set himself up in the temple. It's like all our saints have said this will be Antichrist who does this. And unfortunately, people have been detached so much from those early teachings that Christianity today has become, you know, something that promotes antichrist, an antichrist agenda. My brother here, what's up, Machine?
No blessings.
What's up, man? How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Yeah,
That's what's
just met
up.
a guy. He's I think he's from. Oh man, I forget. Um, I think he might be from Cambodia or maybe Singapore or something like that. But yeah, I think he might be Cambodian or something like that, right?
Yeah,
But but yeah, he is married. He's a Christian and he's married to a Jayish person, and he said he
really.
just celebrated Hanukkah. And
Uh,
yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah, and he was asking, I mean, everybody, like, from their perspective, like, why did they think that Judaism is anti-Christianity? And he was saying that he read the Old Testament. I was like, well, it's kind of weird. Like, did you not read the New Testament? Right? But like, I don't know. But
You know, I
yeah,
got an answer to that because, you know, this is something I actually brought up to Candace Owens, because she made some post, right? And my question was, I'll show it to you because it connects right with this Hanukkah question, right? All right. So this is what I said to Candace Owens. I said, I genuinely don't understand, why are you saying Happy Hanukkah? Because she says Happy Hanukkah in some video, right? And I said, the Jews believe Christ is boiling in hot excrement according to the Talmud, you know, which is absurd. You know, like how can we be celebrating another religion that says that our God is boiling in hot excrement, right? I would ask the guy you're talking about that question. But it goes to Saint Ignatius of Antioch, first century. He says Christianity didn't come from Judaism. Rather, Judaism is a perversion of Christianity. And there's a quote from him to the Magnesians. He wrote the following: Never allow yourself to be led away by false teachings and antiquated and useless fables. Nothing of any use can be got from them. If we are still living in the practice of Judaism, it is an admission that we have failed to receive the gift of grace. Even the lives of the divinely inspired prophets were instinct with Jesus Christ. Modern Judaism is a perversion of the Old Testament religion, which would be more accurately be called Hebraism. The beginnings of Judaism take place with the Pharisees, as is reported in the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia. The encyclopedia states, quote, the Jewish religion as it is today traces its descent without break through all the centuries from the Pharisees. Their leading ideas and methods found expression in a literature of enormous extent, of which a very great deal is still existent in the Talmud, the largest and most important single member of that literature. Okay, and it says the faith of the Hebrew Bible, which officially began with Abraham, can be referred to either as Hebraism or Mosaicism. after Moses and has since been fulfilled by its only authentic and legitimate continuation, Christianity. Judaism is the continuation of Pharaohism, and it is neither identical to the teachings of Moses, nor is it based on the teachings of Moses. Since Judaism is based on the Talmud, Judaism is in fact a heresy against the teaching of Moses in far more instances than not. The Talmud contradicts the teachings of Moses, thereby violating Deuteronomy 4 and 2, in which Moses himself condemns any attempt to change the written doctrine of the Holy Bible. So I would say to him, like, if his argument is that, Judaism is the teaching of the Old Testament, I would say no, it isn't. This is a second temple teaching that developed from the Pharisees. And if you're a Christian, how could you be in support of the Pharisees who Christ was constantly denouncing? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have like little like verses from the Haggadah,
Uh,
and they're talking about like the seven like levels of heaven and the seven levels of hell,
mm,
right? And all this stuff. And they talk about how there's like a creature in there where there's like he's got like two heads, and the two heads are like constantly arguing with each other.
right. Yeah.
It's like all this wild stuff that's literally like none of it's like seems like it's explanations of the Torah. Some of it just seems like it's totally made up. Like you can't find it in the Torah at all, right?
Right.
So then there's parallels between the Haggadah and the Gnostic scriptures as well, right? So it's interesting how
Well, I
they've
would
got a
say,
similar, yeah.
the Kabbalah sort of developed as like a Jewish Gnostic teaching that was Babylonian, right? It's like this is sort of Gnosticism combining with Judaism. That what the Kabbalah actually is, I think, because I always bring this up. It's like the Simonians, where you look at the Simonians and they have this weird diagram that looks very much like like a Kabbalistic tree of life, and I don't know how old that Kabbalistic tree of life truly is. You know what I mean? Like, where did they get it? And they'll say, this was a teaching that Moses taught. I don't buy that at all. There's no indication of that, right? They backtrack it and say it comes from what is it, second century or something. When in reality, I think there's what was the name? Something Shalom. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Gershom Scholem.
Yeah, that guy. Where he says it was this is 13th century Aramaic made to appear as if it was from the second century, right? Um, so yeah, it's utter nonsense, really. And I mean, anybody who actually reads and listens to what the Talmudic Kabbalists teach, it's clearly satanic, very satanic stuff, man. And I've seen those guys sort of like draw diagrams and have Lucifer depicted, and they have all these teachings about Satan being um like a handmaid of God in some way, you know.
Yeah, you could literally see the trajectory um from Maimonides and his Mishnah Torah, right? How he wrote the guide to the perplexed, and a lot of the rabbis rejected it because they were like, this is just Greek philosophy, right? And then then finally you find like these people like Abraham Abulafia that are like looking at the teachings of Maimonides, right? Right. And you have people like Isaac Luria who are looking at
Right.
the teachings of Maimonides, right? And they're developing this system, right? Well into the 15th century. So the trajectory of thought because all these people commented on all these previous thinkers, right? So
Yeah. And there's something that I know Restoration of the Breach brought up, and I'm like, This guy is a Templar who teaches the Kabbalah in Masonic lodges, and he was talking about Pope Innocent III sort of accepting teachings of the Kabbalah, and I thought that was a trip, you know. And there's this book that a Catholic monastery had put out, and in that book, there's it seems to be Kabbalistic teachings, but they're like Christian Kabbalah, right? And in that book by Michael Hoffman, The Occult Renaissance of the Church of Rome, he goes through how there was an acceptance of the Catholics of the Kabbalah, you know. And I know the Jesuits were using the Kabbalah to they discovered the electromagnetic light spectrum, studying the Kabbalah. So I mean, the Gnosticism and Judaism definitely have combined, and they're trying to appear as Christianity. I think that's really Protestantism is rooted in that in a lot of ways, because I think the early Protestants, they seen the Freemasons as sort of their protectors from the Catholic Church. They could go to the lodge and sort of communicate um, and use those means. And ever since then, I think that's why you have all these Protestant preachers that are telling us that Israel is, you know, some holy nation, when it's like, didn't this didn't Israel come from Moses Hess? You know, and like atheistic Jews in some way. Like what is the Israel? The question is, they believe the Israel the Bible's talking about is the same Israel we see today, you know, and that's not the case, right? But that's what they're trying to sell people on.
Yeah, I mean, if you really observe the contents of of Gnosticism, right? They have a little bit of Zoroastrian influence. They have a little bit of Greek influence, right? They have parts of Plato's Republic, right?
Right,
And then they have like all this stuff about goddesses, right? So they have like a little bit of pagan influence there, right? And then of course you got the whole Jewish influence. And the Jewish influence is evident because they're looking at figures like Cain, right? Like the Cainites are naming their whole sect over these figures that are in the Old Testament, right?
right.
And Philo is actually talking about these people who are like Melchizedekians, right? Who are
Mm-hmm.
like just followers, like they're basically antinomian sects of Jews, right? That he's complaining about in his writings. And even though he has a bunch of Alexandrian influence himself, right, you could see that within the cobwebs of the Alexandrian influence, right, you have the sort of the Jewish influence on Gnosticism, because what they're really making a statement about is the Old Testament, right?
Right.
They're using sort of a new thing about Christianity to comment on the Old Testament, right? So
They like to mask their occult practices in a Christian trapping, and that's something that what's his name, Anton LaVey talks about in his book, "The Satanic Rituals," which
right,
a lot of Christians don't want to touch something like that, because there's this kind of fear of, maybe some demonic energy coming up. I don't know, but I think the way I looked at that is like, we have to know our enemy to a certain extent, and I really came across some of those writings just like looking into like, what do these people actually believe, right? To like
right,
have polemics against their teachings. And then when I've read it, it's like he's exposing it all. And it's almost knowingly, because he knows Christians aren't going to read this book, right? And within it, he talks about this whole Christian trappings thing where, um, Freemasonry, it's like Freemasonry appears to be Christian, and that you could be a Christian and be a Freemason at the same time. And that's something the Templars were specifically that. where someone could join and you could seemingly be a Catholic, but behind closed doors, they're spitting on the cross and they're doing all these weird, rituals that are very anti-Christian. Um, but that's like the Nicolaitans. I feel like modern Freemasonry comes from the Nicolaitans, and the Nicolaitans are mentioned in the Bible. There was a sect that's mentioned in Revelations, and what they were was they were people that would sacrifice to teach Christians to sacrifice to the pagan gods, or like eat sacrifice, or meat that was blessed in some way. I don't. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
I gotta look it up.
Right.
It's not off the top of my
Right.
head,
Meat
but
that was sacrificed to idols.
yes, that's it. And their kind of teaching was that, oh, okay, so we can't uphold the Christian belief, like to sort of renounce our sins and go about it. So we're going to sin as much as we can, right? And in that way, we'll be purified in some, it's some weird type of thinking like this. I have something on this, so because I'm kind of like relaying it really discombobulated.
Yeah, Paul talks about this. I think this is his confrontation with Peter might be linked to the meat sacrificed to idols because he blames people for eating with Gentiles or something like that.
Okay, so Nicolaitans from Nicholas, appointed by the apostles to serve, who was out of jealousy for his wife, taught his disciples together with others to commit shameless deeds, and spoke of Kavalaka, Prunic, and other barbarian names, introducing them into the world. Okay, that's one thing I have on it, but I have something else. Okay, the depths of Satan is the name given here to the teachings of the Nicolaitans as predecessors of the Gnostics, who call their false teachings the depths of God. So let's see. I think I got it. Here it is. So here's a homily that I have on this. So it says, so now the Lord addresses all those Christians in Thyatira who did not accept the polluted teachings of the woman Jezebel, the faithful who did not know the so-called deep things of wisdom, which are nothing but the deep secrets of Satan. Under the name of Jezebel, my friends, we also have to include another category of faithful who, much like the self illuminated of last week's lesson, stay in the church, attend church, and receive Holy Communion. However, their activities as far as the faith goes are totally irreconcilable with the teachings of the church. Let's not forget that the woman Jezebel in the epistle of the Lord to the bishops of Thyatira is of a Gnostic background. For the Lord said, quote, she teaches and deceives my servants to commit fornication and eat food sacrificed to idols. So that's Revelations 2 and 20. Do you remember when we dealt with the Nicolaitans, who were also of a Gnostic influence? The important thing here is that this so-called false knowledge, or the things falsely called knowledge, as the ancient church fathers, particularly St. Irenaeus, described, is categorized as satanic. The Lord now addresses all those who were closely connected with the bishop and had stayed true to the healthy teaching. They were not connected with the bishop. They were not connected with the bishop and had stayed true to. They were not indoctrinated. My bad. Okay, as the heretics who claim in the deeper knowledge and wisdom, or in the reality of the demonic knowledge and the demonic wisdom. These heretics speak about the depths of their wisdom as an exclusive wisdom, as a secret knowledge, and as an unapproachable and untouchable wisdom to infidels, that is, to the unsacred and uninitiated. The secret works of lawlessness is constantly at work, according to St. Paul, especially today as we have an offspring of Gnosticism, which is Freemasonry, or simply Masonry. Masonry is a Gnostic heresy. Sure enough, the books of the Masons call us, the non-Masons, defiled or unsacred. They claim to have the light, the illumination, and the pathway to the depths of knowledge, the depths of wisdom, the depths of philosophy, as which, as they claim, we are ignorant. Freemasonry is nothing less than a natural descendant of ancient Gnosticism. It can be classified as neo-Gnosticism, if you will. I may have referred to Masonry at many times that I may be asked at the risk of labeling it somewhat an anti-Masonic psychotic. I assure you, my friends, this is not the case. Masonry is a contemporary reality which affects everyone, everything in our time. It is certainly not a good strategy to underestimate the capabilities of the enemy. In order to fight an enemy successfully, we cannot underestimate its power. Masonry is powerful. It is the power of Satan. That is precisely why we are fighting, and we will always continue to fight as long as we live against Freemasonry. Do not be misled by the fact that it has no transparent public knife, no publications, no open lectures, no apparent recruiting agenda or advertising. It works secretly. Masonry is Gnosticism. With God's help, this is precisely what we will show today. We will prove that Masonry is of a Gnostic dimension. We will see this by referring to the official documents of Masonry that we have in our possession. Once we prove this, then their doctrine must be included in this very letter of the Lord to the Bishop of Thyatira, which condemns the woman Jezebel. Jezebel is the perpetrator of this foreign doctrine, which deceives and misleads the servants of Christ. Since Christ again condemns her, it only stands to reason that he also condemns Masonry. We need to prove this, and I'm going to ask you, my friends, to give me your undivided attention and learn how the Masons themselves define their philosophy. We'll do this directly and not circuitously. Circuitously. I don't know what that means. Even though it is more than obvious. I repeat, Masonry is Gnosticism. Once we know this, the case is closed. As Gnosticism is under condemnation of the church for the last time, Holy Scripture has written against Gnosticism. Both St. Paul to Timothy and St. Paul in his Catholic epistles write against Gnosticism. It is not surprising that the church fathers fought Gnosticism with an unparalleled vengeance, because it fought the church with the same vengeance. Because Gnosticism may not be familiar to everyone, I will simply say a few things about it. Even though I have done a number of times in the past, in a few words we can say in reality, Gnosticism is a religious philosophy. It accepts a God, a world, and a human being. It accepts certain relations between a God, the world, and man. It looks at the world with dual vision, as good and evil. So it sees good and evil in the same world. And it states that good in the world must be the work of the good God, and that what is evil in the world must be the work of the evil God. Consequently, God is not one, but two persons. God consists of two personalities, or simply two gods. Please keep in mind that there are great variations within Gnostic philosophy. There are great differences between the Gnosticism of Marcion and the Gnosticism of Valicides. Valicides? How do you say that? Basilides? I don't know. I think that's what it is. And
Yeah,
many
you
others.
can say Basilides.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I wonder what
yeah,
his teaching was.
I
You know
think
anything
he's
about
like
him?
a docetist.
Oh, I
I
see.
could be yeah.
Which that, 1 John kind of brought that up in the past. It was like 1 John was written directly against the Docetists, and that's super. I didn't know that for a very long time. But there's an Australian monk, or he might be just a priest. I don't know what he was, but he's does a great lecture on the Antichrist, and he brought up the Docetist and early uh, Gnostic
Oh
teachings.
no, he's into emanations. He's an emanationist.
Oh, okay, so
I'm looking
that's
into
more
it now.
closely aligned with the sparks, a Kabbalah or something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and he says, in many orders, they each have their own idiosyncrasies. However, all these different Gnostic systems maintain the foundation of dualism, which is the existence of two gods, the good God and the evil God. The good God creates good, and the evil God creates evil. They are always at war with one another. In the midst of the battle, man is always the unfortunate victim. That's sort of Zoroastrianism, isn't it? Like they have that same teaching, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh, which one?
This dualistic teaching that the good God creates good and the evil God creates evil. They're always at war with one another in the midst of this battle. Man is always the ultimate victim, unfortunate victim.
Um, I don't know about the man being a victim part, but I think the rest of it generally yes. Right?
Okay,
You know,
cool.
because I think maybe they might say like the the good is just more powerful than the evil, right? But they do,
Oh, with
yeah,
them. Whereas the
yeah,
dualist would say that good and evil are equal opposing forces.
um, yeah, like basically to that effect. I think there's some of the Gnostic texts that we read on the show,
Mm.
right? That were saying that they were quoting Cain as saying like there's no justice in the world, like God's not gonna judge anybody. Basically, you
That's
know,
crazy.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
believe
they
that
were
at
saying
all.
that um that basically like God knew that Adam was gonna eat the apple. Like it's kind of like really standard like atheistic arguments,
Yeah,
that
that's
you
always
can hear
our
today.
argument. It's like someone knowing something, and it's like I can know you're going to do something. That doesn't make me complicit in your action or like responsible for the action you do in some way, right? Like for instance, like I can know you're going to go out and I don't know steal something, right? I'm not saying that you would, but you know what I mean. Anybody, I'm not going to be convicted for theft if you stole something. You know what I mean? Like I don't know, it's crazy, but like we don't hold that same like why we hold God to that logic is beyond me. But they are always at war. Man is forever struggling to become free from the evil God. In the final analysis, Gnostic believes that man always hopes for such deliverance. He lives within nature. The Gnostic man does not believe in an omnipresent God, even though he considers God invisible. In reality, for him, God is not above time or space. Gnosticism strives to borrow many elements from outside because Gnosticism is itself an empty and naked philosophy that does not have anything of its own in merit. It takes from whatever every human philosophy has to offer and whatever the mystical religion has have to offer. It says Orpheism, Eleusinian mysteries, Hermeticism, the Trice Grand Hermes, the Eastern mysteries, Cybele, the mysteries of Osiris and Isis. These are ancient Egyptian mysteries. It has used elements from all these. It has taken elements from Judaism and from Christianity. Gnosticism has made a philosophy mixture of all of these, which is then it offers as its own. The danger behind Gnosticism is that it does not officially deny Christianity. Now, if someone tells me I don't agree with you, I deny your beliefs, you are my enemy. I understand this. I keep my distance. However, when you hide and you do not show any denial, if you move about, you exist, breathe, and slither within the church, you take Holy Communion, you attend church, and yet you are an enemy and estranged from the body, then there is real danger. This is plainly seen in the Freemasons. They take Holy Communion. They may but be on the parish council. They are always in the church, and they will use this to their advantage. If one would question them, they would have no problem responding, "Yes, I am a Mason, but I am also a good Christian. I come to church, I take Holy Communion, I love my brothers." This is not to their advantage, but to their detriment. It is most unfortunate that this is the predicament of the woman Jezebel, who moved freely within the church of Thyatira. She is the typology of the contemporary Gnostics and Masons, as she was for the ancient Gnostics. As I promised, we will expose some of their doctrine and their own literature. It's pretty interesting, like what he's talking about right now. It's like Jezebel is like the type of the modern Mason, right? Because they want to stay in the church. And this is something that we're seeing within world orthodoxy amongst their hierarchs. Like, for instance, Bartholomew, the patriarch in Greece, he wants to appear as the patriarch of all of Greece. And, he views himself as the Pope of orthodoxy. And he wants communion with the Pope. And it's like, why is this? And it's because he's a Mason. And what Manly P. Hall talks about is the Mason bows at every altar. He accepts every creed, right? And this is something Vivekananda said, another Mason. He had that same doctrine, right? Bowing at every altar. Um,
Right.
it's crazy. We will notice that in and on the exterior of Masonic lodges, as well as in their booklets, a central position is reserved for the letter G, which is placed within a star. In the Greek lodges, the third letter of the Greek alphabet is used, the letter gamma. In the Latin language, the letter G is used, which is placed within the center of a star. It is a very common symbol that can be seen in the welcoming signs of every city and every small town. It is a blue sign, and in the center of the sign is a letter G enclosed by the configuration of a square. On the top of a 90-degree angle of the square, like the square tools of the builders, is a compass, an instrument used for drawing circles upon a 45-degree angle. This is the most popular sign of the Masons. You see it on the rings of the bankers, maybe some of the attorneys, on the pels of some judges, on the temples of Freemasonry as you drive around. Now, the square and the compass are not as a commonplace as we think. The symbolism around this figure is very rich and multi-sided. I will only tell you some of the most basic symbols. The square on the bottom on the right angle is the symbol of matter. On the top, the open compass, open at a 45-degree angle, symbolizes the spirit. So the symbolism pertains to spirit over matter. That is the basis of the dualism, the chronic tug of war between spirit and matter. Keep in mind, my friends, that Christianity does not accept two godly sources. There are not two gods. God made the heaven and the earth and all the things of the earth. There is nothing that has not been created by the one God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was not made. That was made, John 1 and 3. The Word of God created everything, so it is not possible to have a contradiction in the words of God. How is it possible to have good and evil work against or go against these very objects or creations of God? If evil exists in the world, this is not a consequence of dualism. It is a consequence of the interference and interaction of free willed and logical beings, the devil being the first. This explains the introduction of evil. After this free will decision to rebel against God, the harmony in nature was shaken. This is how our faith explains evil, and not that it is some creation of an evil God, or that one God is in a state of contradiction, or that there is a discord between spirit and matter. So there is really no such discord between the infinite spirit. God's eternal spirit created the material world. How could this material world then be in opposition to the existence of God? Why would God oppose something that he created? How is this possible? The heavens proclaim the glory of God. Is it possible for the material heavens, the created heavens, to turn against God? Never. The body will resurrect and the body will be saved. Matter will be saved. And this is inconceivable for the followers of Gnosticism. Inconceivable. They believe that matter is something bad. So the compass rules over the square, which represents the matter over spirit. Matter being the square is represented by 90 degrees angle, showing fullness of expression. However, the compass is open at a 45 degrees, which shows that the human spirit, because it has not mastered complete control over matter, will struggle to succeed in this control over matter, or the body. Inside this configuration, full of symbolism, we have the letter G. The Masons are somewhat disappointed that they do not have an international letter that would be commonly recognized by all nationalities and all language of the world. So they ended up using the letter of the Latin alphabet G, since many languages have a Latin or Greek root. Since the letter G is also the initial of the letter of the word God, the G of Freemasons expandedly means God. Please keep this in mind. Barnes, the English Mason poet, writes, "This hieroglyphic brilliance, which cannot be seen by anyone else but Mason brothers." He calls this letter G a hieroglyphic brilliance and says that the light shed by this letter G can only be seen by the faithful brothers of Freemasonry. According to some, this G originated from the Hermetic philosophy that delves into magic. A prominent Mason by the name of Dalco stated in one of his talks, quote, "The letter G, which decorates the lodges, does not only express the name of the great architect of the universe, the god of Masons, but at the same time, it also expresses the science of geometry. According to Linhoff and Poner, I think that's his name, Posner, the meaning of the Masonic G is God, geometry, generation, and gnosis. Gnosis in the Greek language means knowledge, and this word gnosis can be found unchanged in all the languages in the world. All the Gnostics of the world maintain this Greek word gnosis in their vocabulary regardless of language. So this G is the center of a star, or between the configuration of the compass and the square, as we explained earlier. Now, since we saw the meaning behind this G, let's go ahead to the indoctrination of the 12th degree so we can see what this means to the Masons. I will read from their self-publication manuals. We happen to have their publications, some books. I'll read directly from their publication, and I will stop, make a few comments. So let's take a glance at the initiation to the 12th degree of Masonry. You doing all right? I'm gonna continue with this, but checking out on everybody, see what's up with them. Okay, we got Neurojack. I'm gonna add him to stage. What's up, brother? I didn't see you down here.
But
My
no, it's
bad.
okay. I haven't been here that long, so just I was just trying to catch up with where you guys were at. I mean, you're covering a lot of stuff, and the name of the stream is Discernment, so I think it's all relevant to that topic for sure. Just having
Well,
to know
yeah,
what's
I've tried
true,
to
what's false, and
keep
all
it
that.
there,
I mean,
man. And it's like it's a big, it could go to anywhere. That's really why I did that. That I changed the title to that, right? But what's going on with you today? What's on your mind, man?
I don't know. I'm kind of blank-minded. I must be a Buddhist today or something, but I'm just kidding. But no, there's a lot there. I mean, what I've been thinking about recently is just I think the hardest thing to separate is faith and belief, right? So what I mean by
Yeah,
that is like a lot of people put so much emphasis on belief without realizing it. And I think it's one of those things where we fall into that trap where we're trying to convince people, well, this is the truth or this fact is true or whatever. But ultimately, because people put zero emphasis on the term faith relative to belief, um, that's why people are like fighting each other and killing each other and all these other things. Like, and I think that's why we're living in the hardest times ever because it's honestly easier to deal with like people just slaughtering each other rather than just like this tearing each other down over like minute factoids or whatever people are doing. Like almost
yeah,
always that's a proxy for something spiritual. I would say, right?
yeah. And I think this too is like the definition of faith, right? In the appropriate context. Um, Unfortunately, and like this is a major problem. And it wasn't until I read the survival course that I really understood this distinction. There's a difference between the early church's understanding of the word faith and the modern interpretation of that word, right? And it's like the early church's interpretation of this word wasn't something that was just like blind. This didn't mean faith wasn't like something. Okay, so what does the scripture say about it? It says, I'll tell you exactly what it says. One second.
And then maybe 1 Corinthians 4.
Yes. Well, actually, Hebrews 11. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtain a good report. Through faith we understand that the world were framed by the word of God, so that things we are seeing were not made of things which do appear. By faith offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous. God testifies of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. Before his translation he had his testimony that he pleased God. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of the house, by which he condemned the world, and because here of the righteousness which is by faith. By faith Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which he should after receive an inheritance, obeyed. He went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, and the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city with which hath foundations, whose builders and maker is God. Through faith also Sarah received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang even of one, and him as a good as dead, so many as the stars, the sky's multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. These all dead in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country, and truly, if they had been mindful of what the country from whence they came out, they might have opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country that is in heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared them that a city. By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promise offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, that as Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also received him in a figure. By faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph, and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. By faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the parting of the children of Israel, and gave commandments concerning his bones. By faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents, because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a reason. See, it's like, I think the point I'm trying to make here by quoting this and like reading from this is faith isn't something that's just blind, that doesn't have evidence for it. Like that, it's there's evidence for things not seen. That's really what faith is. It's like you believe this thing is going to happen because God is good, and in your faith in God, these things will happen. If God intends it. And I think that's a big misconception. And it seems like the atheist understanding of faith is something that, it's just like blind hope or something for things that don't actually happen. Or I don't know. Faith is something that a man can say, um, the impossible can happen, because of faith. Your faith in God will make it so.
Yeah, I think it's also like trust. right? Like in terms of like, if you see like the product, like because you need faith in like to have knowledge, and then so faith comes before knowledge, right? And then also you need to do something with the knowledge, so you need to like have trust, like
Absolutely.
I guess in the like in the application of your knowledge, that like no matter what, if you apply what you know faithfully, then you'll receive in the end.
I think about this kind of often. It's like, the part in the scriptures where it's like St. Peter is, on the water, Christ is on the water, and sort of St. Peter is like walking on the water towards Christ. Right. And I think the modern interpretation is like, it's me and Jesus together. We're going to get this thing done. But that's not what faith is about. Faith in that case was Peter leaving himself behind and his will and his understanding of things and walking out towards Christ. It's man coming to Christ instead of this thing. It's us, it's like you're dying to yourself. You're leaving your understanding behind, and sort of giving it to God and saying, you're the reason I'm afloat. And the only reason he sank is because he fell back into his own understanding. And he was losing his belief in that moment in some way. That's the reason he sank. And that's the reason we all
So,
sink, I believe it.
so I want to give you a heads up. Okay, let's go to John 4:22. I want you to tell me how you interpret that.
What I'm not going to give you my interpretation. I'm just for the record.
Yeah, I mean,
You know
the
what I'm
correct
going to do.
interpretation. No, I know, but I'm doing this for a very specific reason.
I got you.
You're gonna see this pop up very Christianity. I can guarantee you it.
There's something that happened in my life. One time I wasn't liking where I was in life, and I maybe had like $2,000 on a card, and it's just like on a Cash App card or something, and that was it. That was the only money I had, and I had my car and stuff, and I like got up and I just like went, and I said, wherever I end up, I'm gonna just go there. Well, I ended up in Carolina Beach, and my car broke down. But where it broke down was like a place where they had campers. Okay, and I got out, and I'm like, my car just broke down. Like I need to fix this, whatever, And I got to talking to the guy that ran the camper place, and he was like, "Hey, this guy," and I was like, "Do you guys got any like I don't know, campers for sale or anything like that?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, this guy just left, and he just left this camper here and he's looking to rent it out or like sell it or something." And I was like, "Do you got this guy's number? Could I talk to him?" So I talked to this guy, and he's like, "Yeah, like I left this camper there, like, what are you thinking about doing?" And I was like, "Well, how much would you let me to sort of like start making payments, or could I start making payments, or maybe buy this thing off you?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Do you have like $800 for a down payment?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." So I gave it, like, my car broke down at this place, right? So I talked to the guy, and I just send him $800 through Cash App, and I'm in this camper. Well, then I get to start talking to the guy, and he wants to start a business. So within the next week, we figure out a plan, and it's like my last bit of money, like, to do this, really. You know what I mean? I had like little things I could do, you know what I mean? Like friends or something, whatever, borrow a little bit of money here or there. I had some leeway. But anyways, me and this guy started a business together. Boom, just like that. Like, broke my car. I ended up getting my car fixed, by the way, but I broke down at the spot, ended up getting a place. That's faith to me, right? It's like kind of like jumping out, not knowing what's going to happen, and it just work out, right? I don't know.
Right, like that's had to happen more than not for most of us just to be alive, I think.
Straight up, it's crazy, you know. I'm not saying like, I don't know. It's a trip. I definitely shouldn't be in the situation, like even breathing right now. The amount of craziness I've been through, and I think that for me at least, that's the proof. That's the proof that something's more, than just me out here, And the moment I started being faithful to God is the moment He started coming through in ways that I couldn't explain. And I don't worry anymore. He says, look at the lilies; they neither toil nor spin. And it's like even King Solomon, all of his radiance wasn't as glorious as one of these. And it's like this idea that even the birds have homes. You know what I mean? He's going to give you what you need every time. Um, but I think a lot of times I've always been the person that gets in my own way. Well, just the same with like Peter seeking in the water. It's like I'm the issue. I'm the reason I'm drowning. I'm my own enemy in life every time, and it's the moment I sort of just like back off and say like you know, the ego or me or the opinions of other people, all that stuff is what's drowning me. That doesn't matter. It's like what's the opinion of God, like me and God, and that's it. And it's like if I stay right with Him and everything I say rings true in accordance with that, then things go right. And even when they go wrong, it's there's no that doesn't matter. Like, you know, that doesn't make or break me because this is temporary anyways. Like, who cares?
Yeah, what about Corinthians 4? Do they have something on that?
Read it if you can.
Here, hold on, let me go grab it. Of course, it will be KJV. Let me see where it is.
I mean, it's a solid translation. You know what I mean? I don't like the fact that the Old Testament's Masoretic. I prefer the Septuagint, because King James scribes didn't understand that the Septuagint was the older text, the Greek text, right? It's like those scribes based it on the older Hebrew text of the Old Testament. They just translated it into Greek, whereas the scribes seen the Masoretic text and immediately seen, or like the translators seen the Masoretic text. It was written in Hebrew, so they assumed it's like, oh, that has to be older than the Greek text. It's like, no, it wasn't. But that's why if you line up the Septuagint Old Testament with the New Testament, it aligns perfectly because it's the direct translation from the original Hebrew Old Testament. But that's why, like, if you find like most Orthodox translations, or like you'll have the Septuagint Old Testament, and then you'll have like a New King James version or a King James version of the New Testament. And I would say that's a reliable way to. I go with the Douay-Rheims for the most part, truthfully. Like, if I had to pick a translation out of all Bible translations, the Douay-Rheims is up there. The only thing is you got to be careful with the footnotes because they're Roman Catholic footnotes. But other than that, it's solid.
Yeah, I'm not finding what I want. There's something about like people praying, and then it's like there's people who pray with the mind, but they need to pray like with the spirit and the mind. And he's talking about like the Pentecostalism or something like that.
It's kind of funny, like when Orthodox, there's been like Orthodox priests that have talked to like Pentecostalists, and it's like we're more Pentecostal than you, truthfully, which is true, like because they have a very strange interpretation of Pentecost. For instance, when they talk about you know the apostles speaking tongues, right? When the apostles spoke tongues, they could, let's say you were talking to a Russian in Greek. You were Greek and you're talking to a Russian who's speaking Russian. The Russian could understand the Greek you were speaking, and the Greek could understand the Russian he was speaking without them understanding the language, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was
I'm
what.
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was 14. So I don't know. So I found it now, but it's not 4. It was 14, where he's talking about people speaking in tongues. So yeah, this is 1 Corinthians 14.
Did you understand what I said there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the difference. So they speak gibberish and say that's speaking in tongues.
Right.
And it's like that's not what that, if you read it, that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about people that don't even speak the same language understanding the language by the Spirit, which is crazy. That's unbelievable, you know. And there there was people there, like, it reads it and like they're like, oh, they must be drinking new wine. you know it's just so nihilistic. Like that's what someone today would say if that was happening, probably like, oh, they're just drunk or something, dude.
Yeah, it says here. It says uh for if you pray in a tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is unfruitful. What am I to do? I will pray with my spirit, but I will pray with my mind also. I will sing praise with my spirit, but I will sing with my mind also.
Huh. Okay, let's go to that verse. What verse is that?
It's 14 through 16. But really, the whole chapter is about people speaking in tongues. But I thought that was the whole, like, I thought that was a very interesting thing because he's talking about people doing things. And then before he says that for one who speaks in a tongue speaks not to men but to God, for no one understands him, but he utters mysteries in the spirit. On the other hand, the one who prophesies speaks to the people to their upbuilding and encouragement and consolation.
Okay, so do you have the Katina Bible app?
No, I don't.
I would recommend getting this because this is what I usually do when I come across stuff like this. So because you can click each verse, right? And each verse it'll give you a commentary. So in this case, like I went to 1 Corinthians 14:14, and we got something from Augustine. Okay, and what Augustine says, he says, "For he speaks thus when that which is said is not understood, because it cannot be uttered, unless the image of corporeal sounds precede the oral sounds by thought of the spirit." And then we got Ambrosiaster. He says, "What can a person achieve if he does not know what he is saying?" All right. We got Origen, which, he's considered a heretic, but about 80% of the things Origen said are sometimes true, you know. He says, "If you have brought a word in praise of God, not new and fresh from the learning of the Spirit, from the teachings of God's grace, your mouth indeed offers a sacrifice of praise, but your mind is accused on account of sterility of yesterday's flesh." That's interesting. So Origen said, "If you have brought a word in praise of God, not new and fresh from the learning of the Spirit, from the teachings of God's grace, your mouth indeed offers a, quote, a sacrifice of praise, but your mind is accused on account of the sterility of yesterday's flesh." All right, we got a Catholic here, George Leo Haydock, and sometimes the Catholic gives us all right things, because they quote from other saints. And he says, "I pray in a tongue, my spirit prayeth, but understanding is without fruit. If it may signify without fruit or profit the other, though some understand, as if by the gift of tongues, they sometimes spoke what they themselves did not understand." "For if I pray in an unknown tongue, my spirit prayeth, my spirit is refreshed. According to St. Chrysostom, the gift of the Holy Spirit which is in me prayeth, makes me pray and utter my prayer in public." Theophylact and Erasmus, following St. Basil, understand breath by spirit. In other words, my voice, produced by the vital and vocal breath, prays, but my mind is unfruitful, because it does not understand the meaning of the words uttered. Primasius, too, says that the words spirit here is to be understood. Prayers uttered sometimes when the mind is thinking of something else, but the spirit is the true sense. The best fits is what follows. Okay, so he goes to Thomas Aquinas, and I don't agree with Thomas Aquinas about a lot of things, but this is what he says. Commenting on this clause gives three other meanings, but they are not those in the apostle's mind. But my spirit, my understanding is fruitful. St. John Chrysostom, Theophylact, and Ambrose, Thomas, and Cajetan think that the apostle is speaking here of those who had received the gift of tongues, but who, like Balaam's ass, did not understand what they said, or at the event did not enter into the mysteries contained in their words. St. Augustine says the same, and it is gathered from verse 28. "For these prayed without fruit in such tongues, for though their spirit fed on God in pious devotion, yet their mind was not fed on any understanding of the words of the prayer. But I say that the Greek here is the same as meaning as it is rendered in Latin in verses 19, and in chapter 16 in Revelation verses 9, where we read, 'Here's the meaning of the vision of the beast, which hath wisdom.' St. Paul makes the same distinction between the tongue and the mind, or the letter and the spirit, which is so common amongst rhetoricians. Since our meaning here as passive understanding, that which I am understood by all, not active, by which understanding things. This mind, quote, or signification of tongues is without fruit, because one takes it in, and no one is aroused to devotion. This is the natural meaning." And St. Basil seems to hold it. Okay, he gives some. What is it? What he's talking? Secondly, Ecumenius and Theodorat give an explanation which is not improbable. "My mind or my aim and object is without fruit, not on the part of the speaker, but the hearer, whom the speaker strives to excite to piety. It is certain, from verses 14, 16, and 19 that St. Paul is speaking of the fruit of the sight of the hearers, for he is speaking of the prayers and the spiritual songs which some of the laity composed under influence of the Holy Spirit and uttered in public, or sang in the church of the time of their spiritual feasts for the comfort, instruction, or exhortation of the people. He wishes them to be said in the vulgar tongue so as to be understood by all. Otherwise, he says, they would be fruitless. You will perhaps say that the Mass and the canonical hours ought then to be said now in the vulgar tongue. I deny that this follows. For the apostle is speaking the prayers which any layperson might compose for the edification and quickening of the people, not of the public divine offices, which the clergy now perform with approbation, not to say at the command and in the name of the whole church, the worship and praise of God with solemn and uniform majesty. In Latin, this is a Catholic, so again, he's giving a lot of good information, though. It's like this. That's kind of an interesting thing, is because the Catholics still have an Orthodox root to some of their teachings because they're pulling from the Orthodox saints, and quoting them. But
I think Neuro's in there.
Oh, he is? Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah,
He
I
may
think
have dropped
he
out.
is. Let me see. All right, here he is. I don't know. This is a bit hard to.
I've lost service, man. I'm sorry.
What did you say, man?
I said I lost service.
Oh,
There's like a lot of people out for the holidays, so the cell service is like really weird right now. So sorry, go ahead. Morgan.
no, I was just reading that thing. I don't know. I don't really understand it, to be honest with you. I'm not gonna act like I do. Kind of above my pay grade. I got
422.
What? You're breaking up, brother. I don't know. It's 1 Corinthians 14 and 14. He has more here. Like, he's got a whole page kind of things he's saying about this verse. I understand to a certain degree, but really what he's talking about is like the mind of a man's that the intent, the things that they're saying with their mouths aren't aligning spiritually with God, although they're claiming to be like upholding the faith by their words. Because in truth, like there's a disconnect happening here, where they're not spiritually truly on the right path in some way. I think that's really what it's about. Like, the heart's not in it.
Yeah, but I think Neuro was talking about 422 or something like that. But yeah, I think you already went through that.
Yeah, did you guys read 422 on the thing? I was trying to listen, but I had no service, so I don't know if you did or not.
What is it? Corinthians 4 and 22? What were you talking about?
John 422. John 422.
John 4 and 22. Let's see. I don't know. All right. John 4 and 22. Are we talking about 1 John 4 and 22? Or John, like...
No, like I think he means the Gospel of John 422.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, not like
you worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, that part.
Okay. So let's go here. All right. This is Cyril of Alexandria. So he says that the Son is not the number of worshipers, and that he is Word and God, but rather worship with the Father. He speaks again as a Jew and a man, since the economy of the matter his hand demands now to this mode of speaking, for Christ would not have missed meet opportunity. Yet does he attribute something more in respect of understanding to the worship of the Jews? For the Samaritans worship God simply and without search, but the Jews, having received through the law and the prophets the knowledge of him who is, as far as they were able.
You
Therefore he
go even
says that the
okay.
Samaritans... Huh?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Therefore he says that the Samaritans know not, but that the Jews have good knowledge, of whom he affirms that the salvation shall be revealed, that is himself. For Christ was the seed of David according to the flesh, David of the tribe of Judah. Amongst the worshippers, again, as man, does he class himself, who together with God the Father is worshipped both by us and the angels. For since he had put on the garb of a servant, he fulfilled the ministry befitting a servant, having not lost the being God and Lord and to be worshipped, for he abideth the same, even though he hath become man, retaining throughout the plan of this dispensation after the flesh. So in other words, in the fact that Christ is a true Jew in the sense to the woman who views him as merely a man, right? He is saying that we, as opposed to you Samaritans, have received the truth through the prophets. And being that he is Christ, he's giving the doctrine that was given to Moses and the prophets in the correct context, as opposed to the context that was received by the Samaritans. Does that make sense?
So that's, and who's that you're reading from?
That was Saint Cyril of Alexandria.
Yeah, but that does make sense in context because
Sure it
he's
does.
talking to the Samaritan woman at the I'm at the well. So I don't know if you're familiar with the scene. That is a scene, right? Unseen.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so at this stage he's in Samaria talking to the woman at the well, and this scene does not appear in the other gospels, right?
What?
I don't think Jesus goes to Samaria in other gospels, right?
He's at the well in the gospel. It's in the
Right.
Gospel of John right here. He's talking to the woman at the well.
Yeah, I'm talking about in the other gospels. Does he
I
go to
don't know.
Samaria?
I mean, because we're talking about when we talk about the gospels, we're looking at a uh, multiple perspectives on the same event, and not all of them are documenting everything that happened. Others document things that the others don't.
No, yeah, no,
I
yeah,
mean, it's kind of like,
yeah. Um, no, I understand that part, but I'm saying like in the same gospel, right? In John, right? He talks to the Pharisees later, right? And he says like they're the sons of the devil and all this stuff, right? This is the same gospel.
right. But I would say this is that they are the sons of the Pharisees because they aren't upholding the teachings that were given to the Jews, whereas Christ is truly upholding the teachings that were given from the prophets to the Jews.
Yeah. Yeah, then he says to the Jews, before Abraham was, I am, right?
Correct.
So
So,
this is
in other
and then
words,
they
it's
rip
like
off
when
their
he's talking to
clothes.
the Samaritan woman, he's talking to her as a true Jew. And being a true Jew is to be a follower of Christ. And if she sees him as merely a man in the moment, it's like he's telling her that salvation has been given to the Jews in the sense that the prophets have taught this doctrine, right? That there would be a Christ. He's talking to the Samaritan specifically to her in the context that she would understand. If that, but if it's taken out of that context, it could be looked at in a weird, strange way. But we're looking at it from hindsight 20/20 with the context given within the whole of the tradition. It's not just like misplaced, I guess. Like anything that you look in the gospel has to be understood within the context of the whole. And that's a scandalizing statement for a lot of people. Like he said, salvation is given to the Jews, but that's true, because the prophets, many of the prophets, especially in the case of Moses, he's a Jew. He's given the understanding that Christ will be Messiah, and that, like you said, Abraham seen my time, and he knew what would happen. He tells the Pharisees that, right? That's why there's this major distinction between what the Pharisees taught and what the Christians taught. What we would say is that the continuation of what the prophets were teaching was fulfilled in Christ and has been given to his church. That's, and those that follow Christ can be considered true Jews. And what does the meaning of Jew mean? It means to be a chosen of God, a chosen people of God. It's not a racial thing. It's not something that is inherited by blood or the flesh, because St. John the Baptist say? Don't say that you are sons of Moses or sons of Abraham, because God can create, sons of Abraham out of these rocks.
Right.
It's not about the blood. It's
Right.
Right.
Right. I think that statement exists in all four of the Gospels. It's like repeated in all four.
Well, it is. In different ways and in different contexts and in different, there's I mean, if you're going into it with an idealized image of how the statement should be stated in each gospel, you can find a problem if you're looking for one. It's like, why isn't it stated here? Well, it's stated in other ways. If it's understood in this gospel and it's understood in this gospel, and there's a complete agreement, and we know that they're in agreement because we have Acts 15, where all the apostles come together and make decisions at a council. Were there discrepancies where some felt like, well, the Gentiles will have to circumcise, they'll have to be circumcised to be a part of the church? There was a disagreement there. And what did they say? The Holy Spirit saw it fit that this doesn't have to go down. It's
right.
But there was a criminal investigator who was an atheist, and he read the Bible, the New Testament, and he said that the fact that certain gospels have slight variations that other gospels don't actually is an indication that the story being told is true. And he said that in his experience, when he was looking at crime scenes, sometimes there would be slight variations within a story amongst people that had witnessed a crime. Right. And rather than a crime being perfectly documented, those slight variations are an indication that what was being told is true. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. The sheer number of varying accounts, right, is like I've heard it been said that there's more accounts for Jesus in a known time period than for any other historical figure, right?
Well, I mean, I would say this is within the accounts of the scriptures, there isn't these major variations that I don't see that when I read the scriptures. What I am seeing is different perspectives of the same event. And it's I'm not seeing contradictory statements. I'm not seeing that. That's me.
Yes. Yeah, certainly when you get to the end, there's no difference at all. The same thing is happening. The same statement is being made. There's statements being made about the resurrection of the dead and about Christ being crucified. Right, so all this stuff. So that's a similar thing that exists in all four.
Right. And I would say that by the time we get to 325 or something, the the canonization of what scriptures were accepted and weren't had come to a fruition, like that they had understood like what was inspired and what wasn't. And I there's arguments to be made that there's some things that aren't canonized that were inspired, right? Like there's pieces of material that are still upheld within the tradition of the church, like the harrowing of hell or something like that, right? Like this is something that we all accept, and that's not necessarily in the biblical canon,
Right.
right? Or take like pieces of Enoch. There's situation there. It's obvious that James is referring to Enoch. But what we would
Right.
say is that our modern Enoch isn't the same Enoch, so it's not trustworthy. That's why it's not in the
Right.
in the canon.
Right. They found some bootleg copy of.
I wanted to go over Romans 15:27 through 29 as well.
Romans 15. All right. Romans 15, 27 to 29. All right. It pleased them indeed, and they are their debtors. For if the Gentiles have been partakers that are spiritual things, their duty is also to minister to them in material things. Therefore, when I have performed this, I have sealed them in their fruit. I shall go by the way to the Spain. But I know that when I come to you, I shall come in the fullness of the blessing of the gospel of Christ. Okay, so what's the issue?
Well, I've seen people interpreting that to say that like Christians are slaves of the Jews or something like that.
If pleased them indeed, and they are their debtors, or if the Gentiles have been partakers of the spiritual things, their duty is also to minister to them in material things. Okay, this is what Ambrosiaster says. In this way, the believers among the Jews will rejoice at God's providential saving of the Gentiles through their ministry. For the Gentiles, by themselves completely to the service of God, and not caring at all of the things of this world, offered an example of the good behavior to believers. Then, too, the apostle wanted us to be sympathetic and merciful, so that we might feel obligated to giving alms and to do good works with a willing heart. Because whoever hopes for mercy from God must be merciful, in order to prove that he has some reason for his hope. For if man is merciful, how much more is God? For this is the payment of reward, that those who receive mercy should be merciful. As the Lord said, blessed are the merciful, for God will give mercy to them. I don't see anything that indicates that the Jews are superior to the Gentiles in any way in that verse. We're all, as the scriptures say, we're all. What does it say? I'll tell you the exact thing that it says. Why that's not true. One moment. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ in all and in all. Christ is all and in all. Okay, that's Colossians 3:11. There was never any situation where you had Jew above Gentile. They're all equal in that sense. I don't know. The Adam Greens of the world are scandalized about something that just, it's very Hitler-esque to me, because he said the same kind of thing. It's like, oh, being a follower of Christ, you're just bowing to a Jew or something. It's very hateful, passion-filled, and pagan-orientated. That's the way I see it.
Well, I think it comes from Nietzsche or something like that. Maybe Beyond Good and Evil or something like that.
Right. It's like you're the slave of the Jew. And it's like, well, if that's the case, then why were, we see all the early saints, especially St. Justin Martyr and, St. John Chrysostom. If you read against the Jews, it's impossible to accuse Christians of being slaves to Jews. Where they're saying, and even in Christ himself says, they say they're Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. And if you put that on Twitter today, it's immediately taken down. But you could post the Talmud that says he's boiling in hot excrement. Why is their tradition constantly calling Mary, or, the Virgin Mary, a whore, and Christ, he's boiling in hot excrement, but somehow we're slaves to the Jews? If anything, I would say Christianity has been the biggest opponent of Judaism ever. It's the biggest opponent of the Pharisees. They've always attacked Christians from day one. So I don't know. Doesn't make sense. If their rabbis created our religion, why were their rabbis killing our people from the beginning? Stoning Stephen, for instance.
Right.
Which, St. Paul was a part of. He was a part of that stoning when he was Saul. Okay, I don't know who this is, but I'm going to add you to the stage, I guess.
Yes.
What's up?
Well, sorry, man. This is the first time I'm here, actually. So I'm just thinking, because I was reading exactly the same Bible passage. It's obviously true that the first Christians are Jews. So saying that,
Hellenistic Jews, specifically. They're Hellenized Jews.
that's right. So what
Yep.
I'm saying is, if if the Gentiles have shared their just quoting the passage here, if the Gentiles have been made partakers of their spiritual things, their duty is also to minister unto them in carnal things. This doesn't mean Jews who are, how do I say it? This is talking about Christian Jews, Hellenistic Jews in particular, not Jews in as a whole.
As a race, right? It's
That's
like
right.
what the meaning of the Jew means to be a follower of Christ. And I'll go to the verse that explains that. So okay, it's Romans 3 or Romans 2 and 28. Or we'll just go to 20 verses for 25. For circumcision is indeed profitable if you keep the law, but if you are a breaker of the law, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. Therefore, if your uncircumcised men keep the righteous requirements of law, will not his circumcision be counted as circumcision? Uncircumcision be counted as circumcision? And will not the physically uncircumcised, if he fulfills the law, judge you even with your written code and circumcision as a transgressor of the law? For he is not a Jew, he is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, not the letter, whose praise is not from men, but from God. Now, when we go to that and click that, if you have the Katina Bible app, there's a a commentary by St. Hilary of Poitiers. And what St. Hilary says in 368, he says, the apostle testifies without any hesitation that those who walk according to the teachings of Christ in the Spirit, not in the letter, are the Israel of God. So the meaning of Israel are those that are followers of Christ. That's the Israel of God. And it's according to the Spirit, not the flesh.
I do have this feeling that there has to be a difference between Jews and Gentiles too, right? It can't just be okay. Everything is just flat, and as long
Well,
as you are.
spiritually, no. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile, right? But in a worldly sense, in a material sense, we recognize that we're, uh, I'm a white person. This person's maybe a black person. And, that in that sense, we can recognize that. Um, but that if you're a Christian, you don't put your nationality above another nationality. You can love the fact that you're people because you're of that people. That doesn't mean, uh, you know, loving your people doesn't equal killing your neighbor. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's like ethnophilatism. That's something that is a condemned heresy in the church, and I could go to that real quick. So, like, there's nothing in the scriptures that is against, like, the Russians sort of having a traditional Orthodox church that's Russian, or the Greeks having a traditional Orthodox church that respects their nationality. Um, but this doesn't mean having a respect for your nationality puts you above another nation, or in some way. We're all equal in Christ. That's why I brought up Colossians earlier 3:11, where it says, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is all and in all. This is something I had a conversation with about nationalism, really, and my reply to them is this: if nationalism means love of one's homeland or people group, this is fine. If it, however, is a mask for malicious intent against other homelands or people group, then it's evil. So then the topic of ethnophilatism came up, and I said, if by ethnophilatism what is generally meant is the idea from the 1870s that by some Bulgarians that in essence sought to create exclusionary ethnic eparchies and drive out everyone else of not the same ethnicity, that is condemned within the Orthodox tradition. There's a great difference between loving your family and then from that concluding you should kill your neighbors. It is generally applied that the Fanar, which is the EP, in essence made, maybe not in all particularities, did do what they condemned. So the EP came together as a synod and condemned ethnophilatism because of the Bulgarians. And a lot of people that are opponents, who want to perpetuate ethnophilistic, sort of like white nationalistic ideas within Orthodoxy, they try to say, well, the Fanar did the same thing. And the reply to that is this. So it's like, in general reply, the Fanar, in essence, maybe not in all particularities, do what they condemned. And that may be true, but that would simply be the case of Balaam's ass or a broken clock is right twice a day. Hypocrisy from the Greco-centric Fanar doesn't mean God isn't going to use them. If people are very prideful and don't listen, God will in many cases allow them to fall into the very sins and errors that they condemn others for as a lesson. So it's like the fact that they condemned this thing and it fell into the very same thing they condemned doesn't take away from the condemnation being true.
Do you think there's a sense of, let's say, the Jews, um, in a very strict sense of Hellenistic Jews, being the firstborn, um, we're kind of like, just inheriting things, or like how to say it. They're like you know how it is in the Bible stories. The firstborn are just like Cain, are not necessarily ended up inheriting the kingdom. You know, but
Right.
then from an earthly sense, we would still also need to kind of respect that relationship. First, what we talked about in what's that?
Look at Judas. You know, this is a guy that's close to Christ. He's walking with him. He has the money back.
Yeah.
He's one of the 12. Right. It's like, just because, you know, you have this close relationship with God doesn't mean you can't fall away.
Yeah.
It's like, you have to hold on to this thing. There's a really good explanation of salvation that I heard a priest give one time. I asked him, I said, what would you say the difference between the Protestant idea of salvation and the Orthodox idea of salvation? He says, in Orthodoxy, you know, the life preserver's thrown, but you aren't saved until the ship reaches the shore. And that's the big difference. It's like Protestants, it's like all you have to say is this name, and it's almost like a Kabbalistic understanding. It's like all I have to say is Jesus. I believe in Jesus Christ, and therefore I am saved. Whereas in Orthodoxy, it's like I have to hold on to this life preserver until that ship reaches the shore, you know, to be saved. And at any point between the time this ship is heading to shore, I let go of that life preserver, I can drown. And it's not someone taking your salvation away from you, it's you letting go of it. In the same way that Judas let go. And you're right.
Yeah, some of these Southern Baptists believe that as long as you say the words wholeheartedly once, then you can even be a Satanist later and still be saved, which is preposterous.
You got to live it, right? And
Yeah.
that's like, you know, the story of Mary Magdalene, you know, or what we understand to be Mary Magdalene. She's about to be stoned. She, you know, the Jews are like, we're about to stone her. In the law of Moses, it says that if a woman is found to be a prostitute or something, I'm paraphrasing the story, it's like, you know, we're supposed to stone her. And he says, well, he who was without sin cast the first stone. And he looks at her and says, woman, have they stoned you? She says, no, or whatever. And it's like, go and sin no more. That's what he tells her. It's not, oh, well, I saved you now. Now you're good. All you have to do is you know, believe in me and everything's all good now. It's like you have to live the faith you're committed to. So it's tangible. It's not just lip service. Like you got to live it. And that's lost on a generation or like a modern world that wants things easy. They want a fast food Jesus, you know?
I heard a very interesting comment from Sam Shamoon's channel. So you know how the Protestants, they put a huge emphasis on the good thief on the cross, right? So
Right. Yeah.
Sam Shamoon's argument is, let's say for some reason, let's just say by miracle, the good thief actually lived after the crucifixion.
Right.
Would he still need to be baptized to be saved later if he didn't die on the spot?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Because you know, Christ is saying you'll be with me today in the sense that he knows he dies that day.
Yes.
Right. It's like in that context, he's talking specifically to him. They're trying to apply a specific conversation given to the thief to all time. And it's like, that's not, you know, that's not the case. Right.
Yeah.
And you know, if the thief would have lived, he would have needed to live a life in the church. I mean, that would have been expected of him.
Yeah.
But in his circumstance, and it's like that's always the my understanding with God is like the intent and circumstance matters, and that's why we say things like, you know, God will have mercy on who has mercy. When we're asked questions like, well, what if people don't know? Well, I don't know. That's up for God to know what his judgment's going to be. And, I believe we have a just God. So in that sense, if someone doesn't know, then he'll meet them where they're at. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be actively pursuing a life in Christ. That's absurd.
Yeah. The it's well, I really shouldn't just say that this is a Protestant thing. This is more or less a Presbyterian thing. Um, this idea is more prevalent in their circle, and then I'm not Presbyterian before, but from what I heard is, during the 17th century, all the political disputes in the tri-state area was that they're really just trying to figure out who's actually being saved, because the communistic predeterminism basically made them think that they have to pick one, pick those who are already saved as their priest.
Mm. So now this the priest has to be like this perfect thing or something. That's weird.
Yeah, and that's how the whole thing came from, right? Because the the reason why they think that you can just claim wholeheartedly, that Jesus is my savior to be saved is biblical, but then you can't really tell who is doing this wholeheartedly.
Well, think about how prideful that statement is. I had this conversation with someone close to me, that was Protestant, and they're Orthodox now. They're baptized in the church. But it was a wake up call for this person. I said, well, because they were like, well, I'm saved, right? And I was like, well, think about the pride of that statement. You're telling the judgment of God already. He hasn't separated the sheep from the goats. Like, how do you know that when you meet Christ, you're guaranteed your salvation without being judged? It's like that's a prideful statement. I know where I'm going, right? And it's like, if we know that pride is what led to the fall of Lucifer and the reason he's Satan, how could pride get you into heaven? Even the pride of saying you're saved, you know and that was a big wake-up call for this person I know. So
That's nice. I heard an even worse one. Also a Protestant friend who said that who said the same thing, but then also said, I always wonder what is the reason why I'm still alive. You just don't know where to start with those kind of atrocity.
I think that when I look into like the roots of Protestantism, a lot of it, especially with like a person like Martin Luther, he was studying things like the Kabbalah, and he makes contradictory statements. Like he says, like, oh, this is a wonderful thing in one statement, and then another is like, oh, that's absurd. But then he's like going to alchemy and big upping alchemy, and how what he was saying something like, oh well, the early Lutherans are a big proponent of what became Rosicrucianism. I don't know if a lot of people are aware of that, but that's true. And the Masons say that without Luther, there is no Freemasonry. The German Masons say that. And it
I,
made a lot of sense, because when you think about the once saved, always saved doctrine, it's Kabbalistic. It's you say a word, and therefore this word magically makes you good, in some way, or like, but that's kind of how the Protestants, the Kabbalists think of like this secret word that they say that Christ used some secret word to raise the dead, and that's how he did his miracles. It's almost as if the Protestants believe the Kabbalistic doctrine, but they combined it with Christianity.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's weird.
I was talking to this also a convert from Protestantism in my church, and we both agreed that the ultimate end of Protestantism is Gnosticism, and this just all the patterns are just matching right there. Yeah, like secret words, secret knowledge that leads to. It's almost like a philosopher's stone in a sense, and you know, at the end, their philosophy is, you know, the world is evil.
There's a guy, I think his name's Anthony Westgate or something like that. He's a World Orthodox guy, but I like a lot of his stuff because I think he's spot on a lot of the times. Which they are. I mean, I'd say about 80-90% of the time they're pretty spot on about most things they say. Because they're going to the Holy Fathers with this stuff, and they are studying some patristic text. So, but I have it here. Let's see if I can find it. Yes, all right. Protestant Linux. Come on, where's this thing at? Let's see. He said it in, I think it was like a blog post or something. Yeah, here it is. He says, nevertheless, in the light of Luther's sola fide doctrine, it is interesting to see how over time it developed into a kind of Kabbalistic magic ritual among modern evangelicals to make a mere profession of faith and be saved, as if the words themselves contain an inherent mystical power to regenerate the individual by simply speaking them. I mean, that comes right from the Kabbalistic teaching. And then, and it makes so much sense why we have Christian Zionists now, where it's like a combination between this Jewish Masonic, political movement combining with Christianity. So, I don't know. Absurd. Craziness. St. Augustine said, if you believe what you like in the Gospels and reject what you don't like, it is not the Gospels that you believe, but yourself. I got something from Father Seraphim survival course. He says, the second great movement in the period of the Renaissance, as it is usually interpreted by historians, is the Protestant Reformation. This is only outwardly different from the humanism. Basically, it is part of the same movement. It is likewise a movement of reason which turns scholasticism and tries to devise a simpler Christianity, which any believer can interpret for himself. This spirit was later, as Korovsky very well says, the spirit that which destroyed the Protestantism itself. The enlightened observer, Korovsky says, could see Luther behind scholasticism and the modern liberal Christians behind Luther. Luther himself was what would probably be considered a narrow fanatic, especially in his later years, but he opened the gate to total subjectivism in religion. And thereupon, he gives us a key also in today, because this is the same principle, the individual, whatever I believe, whatever I think is right to be heard, then he becomes the standard. He says he himself finally achieved some kind of dogmatic system and tried to force it on his followers. But the very idea which he fought for was that each individual can interpret for himself, and therefore from this comes sects. The religious wars which began in this period, because there were two religions, first Luther in the 1520s, who broke off, had already a separate organization, and Calvin and the other Protestants. Therefore, these began to fight with the Catholic princes. And the religious wars of the 16th century came upon, which really ended up about by the middle of the 17th century. These wars are rather unimportant in themselves, and their main result was to discredit religion altogether, and led in the next historical period, which we'll discuss in the next lecture, which I'm not going to cover. And it says, to the search for a new religion beyond any kind of Christianity, which is the beginning of modern Freemasonry. Both humanism and Protestantism continue the work of scholasticism. And Francis of Assisi, the search to improve on orthodoxy, to improve on Christianity as it has been handed down in the tradition. So they continue the work of Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor. Both humanism and Protestantism are stages in the destruction of the Christian worldview. Later on, there are more advanced stages.
Yeah, one thing I find very funny about the development of Protestantism is when it was between, the dispute between Calvin and Zwingli. Sorry, not Calvin. Luther and Zwingli is mainly on the Eucharist. And then if you look at the path of the development nowadays, almost all the Protestants just don't have Eucharist at all.
Right.
It's like, how did they just have missed maybe the most important part of the liturgy?
Yeah, I think Luther still had the Eucharist, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, and he still would refer to certain saints. He didn't want to throw them all out, which they eventually did. The saint becomes a foreign concept to the modern Protestant. But Luther would agree with those that agreed with him. That was his kind of view, which is, that's still stupid, but you could see where, this individuality where it says that anything I interpret is true, just leads to where we are today. And why, something like Protestantism and Freemasonry can just sort of combine so easily. Because, the Freemason is the next step, really. It's like, why not just combine humanism with the scholasticism of Protestantism? And then what do you get is this sort of impersonal religion that anything goes.
Yeah, interesting. I was thinking of Eucharist when you were talking about the topic of, belief or faith, because it does seem like, well, if you put the Eucharist aside as not even important, or you don't believe that,
Yeah,
it was Jesus Christ after all, then your only interaction, your only interaction with what is above, what is heavenly, is just through your intellect, really. So what else can you really think of when it comes to belief? Then it's just you intellectually believe something, really.
with the mind, there's no tangibility within, like there's no sacrament, right?
Yeah.
Christ isn't
Go ahead.
something that we experience at that point. It's just
Exactly.
something that we imagine.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no communion.
Right.
Literally.
So your Christ is like this. It's an antichrist. Absolutely. I mean, how else could you put it? Because there's no physicality to it, right?
Nice. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they don't. They're never going to get that distinction, right? Because they don't have the communion as a basis to view it through that way, like,
Yeah, I gotta read Philosopher Rose again. I think he wrote in the book Nihilism that the Protestants believe in a God who is not powerful enough to raise the dead. What's the word again?
well, that's like idealism. There's a great paper by Father Seraphim where it's like on idealism. It's a letter to Thomas Merton, and Thomas Merton's a Catholic, but the same rule sort of applies, where Christianity becomes like this. It becomes like a moral teaching for what's most efficient, in a worldly sense. You know, we're trying to create a utopia now because there is no kingdom that's not of this world. There's not a mystical reality that we can experience. So therefore, Christianity becomes a cause. You know, just like any other philosophy, it becomes humanism, right?
Right.
That's all it. You know, it has no other choice but to become that because it's obsessed with the material. And it has a false trapping that seems to be there's some spirituality here, but you know, it's like you cry in a place for maybe 30 minutes and then you go about your day. Christianity is something to be experienced on a Sunday for 30 minutes and that's it, you know. Whereas in Orthodoxy, if it I think there's a big difference is like the spiritual experience you have is something that lasts the entirety of your life, not just that 30 minutes. It's not like a temporary um, so-called change or something. Well, I appreciate you guys. I'm 3 hours in. I thank you guys for coming. I enjoyed the conversation. It was awesome, and
Yeah, thank you. Great.
yeah, pray for me,
Yeah,
man.
thanks.
Yeah,
thank
later.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, peace.
peace,
See you.
peace.